Hello, people out there in the big wide world. Welcome to another edition of Simon Says. We have two great guests. One you might know, one you might not know, but we have some great, well, just great people for starters. We have a renowned New Zealand hockey player and now a business person with his own company. Dion Gosling, welcome to you to join us.
Hey guys, yeah, thank you. Nice to be here.
Good to have you, mate. And of course, the wonderful, the great and wondrous Tiffany Cherry, a media personality for a long time in Australia. Welcome to you, Tiff. Good to see you.
Thank you, Simon, and g'day, Dion.
Hello, right everyone. Now, well, it's a strange world at the moment. And firstly, I've always been asked people, Dion, how are you handling it?
Well, good. I've taken over the garage, and my partner Annie has taken over the front room, and the kids have gone everywhere else. So I think that's probably symptomatic of everyone in these lockdown stages. But it's good not travelling quite as much now. So we're moving into it, rolling into it.
You were actually travelling between New Zealand and Australia a bit, weren't you?
Yeah, I ended up with a bit of a travel cycle every couple of weeks. I'd scoot over the Tasman, and have a bit of time there looking after things. But now just solid here and actually quite enjoying it. It's nice.
Good. And Tiffany, what about you?
It's been an interesting time, as you know, as it has been for everyone. Unprecedented. At the beginning, I actually quite liked it. I liked the slower pace and just sort of reconnecting with people, having more extended conversations. Just not running around and rushing from here to there, and realizing just how crazy our lives were pre-COVID. And then it became pretty tough. As a single mum, having homeschooling my 5-year-old, so she's in prep, and you think that's fine, but it's like, you gotta hold their hand. It's such a formative year. They're learning so much. They're learning how to read, write, and count and arithmetic and all that. So it's been pretty intense. The second part of COVID has been very hard at times. A few weeks ago, it was really tough. Yeah. And I noticed, that was sort of having a real impact on my daughter, which then had a pretty significant impact on me. So we've changed things around, but I think that's the beauty of it as well. I always look, and I think like you, certainly like you, Simon, and probably like you, Dion, I'm always about the positive, glass half full. What can we find? What's the diamond in the rough? What lessons can we learn? And there's so much resilience that's been built around this, and just looking at a way of life that suits you rather than a way of life that you were just sort of programmed into because you really didn't have time to stop and think about what you were doing. Yeah,
no, it's good. And the old teacher in me a long time ago knows that if you've got a grade 6 kid, you can give them a task and they can do half an hour on it. A prep child, you might do 3 minutes if you're lucky.
Oh, yeah, if you're lucky. And then they're crawling under the table, jumping back, trying to watch television. God, no, everything but anyway.
I think I've had some meetings with people, and all of a sudden a little one comes rushing in, and I know one fella actually put a lock on his study, so keep the kids out while he was doing business talk. So that's good. Now let's go back to your backgrounds. Dion, a New Zealander. Now you grew up. What I've been told is always do research, and I'm prepared that Wikipedia doesn't know everything, but let's see how we go. You grew up in which I like. It was described as Howick, the affluent eastern suburb of Auckland. Is that right? I like that affluent eastern suburb.
Yeah. Well, I had my youth in rural Auckland, actually. So bare feet, running down, sliding around on the frost, grabbing a hockey stick in this case, but just having a crack at anything, and getting on your bike and jungle freedom or guerrilla fun. You just got out and about, and so I think there's a lot of experiences that we have in our youth that obviously you kind of pick up and informs the way that you think as you go through. So going from the rural upbringing, and then I went to the North Shore, and it was complete. It was an urban setting. So these two dynamics kind of at play, and I think that what you end up doing is having a crystal ball across all of them, and end up tipping it into into the bowl of how we think these days. So it's really, we're seeing a lot in this COVID time, the kids getting out and creating guerrilla BMX tracks and digging, and it's not actually part of the writing around it's actually part of creating and actually getting up to stuff we probably shouldn't get up to, really.
Wow.
But it's fun, it's exploratory, and I think that, you know, it's what we're seeing through that is a bit of a need to meet the youth, and I think that'll inform their lives and the way that they think going forward. So yeah, it's going to be interesting out of this COVID period. You know, what do the generations take forward with them, and how can that work to establish a community or influence in the way we think? It's going to be really super interesting social experiment, I think, in 10 years' time.
Oh, very good, mate. Very, very good point. And now, Tiffany, did you grow up in the affluent eastern suburb of Myrtleford? Is that right?
I was born in Myrtleford. So my dad comes from a country town called Bright in northeast Victoria. So that's where my brother and I, my family lived. And then my parents divorced when I was 2, actually. So I came down, which was sort of different back then. It's quite normal now, but it was quite different back then. But I came down to Melbourne, where Mum was from, and with my brother, and who you know, Simon, I think you know my brother Tim, and he used to work at Essendon many years ago. Anyway, and so I grew up in Kew, which was, I suppose, an affluent eastern suburb of Melbourne. Yes,
exactly right. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, but I really had the best of both worlds. I thought, I grew up in Melbourne, but I had all my school holidays were in country, Victoria and Bright, literally roaming, as you just said, Dion. I mean, we did that in Melbourne anyway, but, we roamed. Like my dad owned a service station. And so from the moment we woke up to the moment, we would go home for dinner, I was left to roam with my friends. We roamed, and, one of the great memories during summer was he'd get the big truck tires and he'd blow them up, and we'd roll it down to the Ovens River, which was about a block away, and we'd get in, and the 4 of us, we're all under 10. We would float to the next town for the whole day, and we would have a $1 or $2, whatever it was, which was the paper money back then, stuffed in your pants, and no water bottle. You just drink from the river. And we would get to the other town. We'd buy a big thing of chips. We'd pool our money together, and then we'd, make a phone call, and we'd wait probably for an hour, maybe 2 hours before we got picked up. And that was one of the things that we did, just during summer days.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's there's a lot of research to say that we should actually let kids get bored, because when they're bored, they actually come up with, now, as long as it's nothing too dangerous, but they actually come up with great ideas. They actually come very, very creative. Where these days, in lots of ways, we just we give them stuff. We give them a computer, we give them a phone, an iPad or a screen, and they just do. But it's those. I always remember in my time was just, if you went out, you had to be back for tea, or if it was in winter, before it got dark. But we had a street full of, just suburban Melbourne Airport West, street full of kids. And we'd be just out kicking footballs, billy carts, go-karts. Then it got up to actually mini motorbikes and all that stuff. It was, but there was a bit of freedom back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So then, Dion, so how did you get into hockey then? Because you are, and just so people know, you've actually a silver medalist in the 2002 Commonwealth Games against silver medalists, I have to say, to Australia, but I won't rub that in. But
well, even one better. They actually gave us a flogging in that final. I think it was about 6-1 or 6-2 or something.
Wow, so you obviously was very serious about your sport.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that I kind of fell into. I think, like a lot of kids, I tried everything. Tried a bit of rugby, tried a bit of soccer, and just fell into hockey, through a relative who got me into it. So, and then, as I say, as I made that transition from one part of town to the next, I just kind of picked it up and ended up finding a really fantastic guy, a guy who coached all of us as young kids. And I think that, isn't having a coach or a mentor or someone outside the family as a young person growing up that you resonate with, and their language and the way that they talk encourages you, but sort of has some really resonating messages. And I think that this guy brought a whole group of us young kids through, and it just, we didn't set out to, I was a late starter, started probably 12 or 13. Some kids, going to the peak of sport start really young, but I just kind of picked this thing up at 13 and just enjoyed it, and just ended up kind of getting through the representative grades and continuing on. So, just had a crack at any sports and ended up in, culminating in Athens and the Olympics, where the Aussies won gold, of course, with the men, and then sort of finished up in 2005. So it was kind of a career from 94 through to 2005, where you're just having a bit of fun and just trying to do your best and beat the Aussies. That usual banter always kind of.
Yeah, well, there is that cross Tasman, with the cricket and
totally.
the hockey.
Really good mates, and actually you look back now and like that hiding that we got in 2002, to see then that team basically go on and win gold in Athens. You kind of saw that pathway that they went through, and we had a really successful kind of campaign ourselves, but really really incredible to kind of see that team and see them do well over the time.
You did well. You've got, in that says in the terminology of this sport, you did fairly well. You have 169 caps. I want to know, do you actually keep them? Do they give you a cap and you actually get to keep them?
Well, when we first started, I mean, all sport moves along. We used to pay to play for New Zealand. You had to have a player contribution, and you gave your uniforms back. And things have obviously changed and moved through there. But I think that it does help you with a bit of humility and understanding, the work you have to put in, some of the, I wouldn't say sacrifices, because there's always choices about what you do, but certainly there are lots of times, and I'm sure you'll talk further about disappointments and how you overcome that. You learn stuff from those experiences and you go forward. And I think that's why we ended up doing so well in Athens, for our team. And then those lessons that kind of carry forward, but, it's all about progression and learnings, I think.
Yeah, good. It's always about learning. Yeah. Now, Tiffany, sport for you as a kid, did you get involved?
Oh, absolutely. I was like Dion and probably like you. I mean,
I couldn't do anything. The only thing I was good at was football, so I just stuck to that.
I did everything, and I had an older brother, so I kicked the footy during winter and I played cricket during summer. But there was no pathways for girls. There was no Auskick. There was no Kanga cricket or whatever it is for the kids. So there was none of that, and I also did a little athletics. I followed my brother into that, and just loved running, and I played hockey at school as well. I just took up anything that I could. But running was my passion. I was probably better at it as a cyclist, but I didn't like getting big legs.
Fair enough.
Go figure. It's so stupid now, thinking back, opportunities you may have forgone because of something silly like that. But I loved running, and I really wanted to run. After watching, I think we're probably all similar age, watching the Moscow Olympics.
Thank you for bringing me into your age group.
That's
I love
all right,
that.
mate.
Thank you.
Watching the Moscow Olympics, I'm sure you both remember it. And I was 8 at the time. There's a clue on how old I am. And I remember turning to my mum and just saying I was going to go to the Olympics one day. And so I was going to go and all I knew was running, because again, there were no other pathways for me in the other sports I was doing. And so I continued my running all the way through, as well as doing every other sport. And I ended up training. I trained with. You're a training
partner of Kathy Freeman, weren't you?
Yeah. So Catherine, I started training with her not long after she raced in Auckland, Dion, as a 16-year-old. So she was 17, I think, maybe just turned 18. She just moved to Melbourne. My then boyfriend is Indigenous, and they sort of had a connection, and then we connected, and I became a training partner, and then we she's one of my closest friends, and but I just didn't have the talent. I was good enough to run at a national level, but not internationally, and I was often in our training sessions, I was the tortoise, and Catherine was very much the hare, and I'd have to give her, we would do 200 runs, like repetitive runs. And I'd have to give her 50, 60 meters head start, and she would run me down sometimes. And I ran, I was top 8 in Australia. So it was, that was the humility that you learn through that, but the passion to still go to the Olympics always held steady. And then I decided to become a journalist. And then I suppose, as you know, Simon, I ended up hosting the Olympics, which became a dream after I gave up the dream of representing Australia as an athlete. I made the decision there and then, not having any understanding of what it meant that I was going to host the Olympics one day, and then I achieved that dream. So that became my Olympics.
That's a great Olympics. There's a whole lot of people who would just love to be able to say that I was at the Olympics and I was telling everybody about it. I reckon that's a great feather in the cap. That's fantastic. And look, just while we're on that, you even had your media career. You're very diverse. You were up the country. You were the first, if I write, the first female AFL boundary rider.
Yeah,
that's a great,
I got the baton from Dipper, if you can. I still remember the day. Actually, it was an Essendon game, Simon. You might have. I'm pretty sure. Were you? Oh.
And what year was it? You might be aging me here too. Don't worry.
It was 2001.
Oh, thank you.
No, you just finished. You finished.
I think I just finished 9 years before that. I think that's a really good year.
So I grew up an Essendon supporter, Dion. So I've known, so Simon's been a mainstay in my life from the moment that I remember. So Dad owned the service station, and as you can imagine, at the back of the office door, which was the only place I was allowed because otherwise I was in the way. The back of the office door was all the page 3, centerfolds or all the nude, the half naked women, but there was one photo of a guy, and that was Tim Watson.
Oh, the great 32.
Tim. So Timmy became my, actually he lives around the corner from me, so I saw him just 2 days ago. But Tim became my sort of idol, and when I remember asking Dad who that was, and he said, and he sort of had a chuckle. He said, that's Timmy Watson. And he's the greatest. And I thought, well, if he's next to all those girls that all the guys kept coming and looking at, well, then he had to be good. So
had to be good. I'm glad he did have his footy jumper on, though, didn't he?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right then. That's great. That's great. Well, just in that down, like going to those big, events like the Olympics, like the Commonwealth Games. How did you feel about that? How did you see that?
Well, yeah, probably like you, Tiff. I saw it was the '84 Olympics for me as well, where you kind of got this cue, and I think you always have this vision of what it is. But I think as you worked your way through your career, it was what was normal for you. So in terms of playing and training, and the people you hung out with, like Kathy, when you train, Tiff, they're just your mates, and you train, and so you end up arriving at this place and. Your aims and your goals are similar in how you might get there. So, each of them have got really unique differences. So the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games and then World Cups, of course, all have a slightly different flavour and feeling, and they're all different around the team dynamics and also your own personal development. So going to a tournament at 23 is completely different to going to a tournament at 33. And so you end up, while you've got this thing called experience, you kind of end up, everything's relatively fresh and new as you go there. But certainly, I remember at Athens, we sort of walked in and, you get Roger Federer kind of sitting there at the table, having a drink, and you can sit next to him. Or, we had a rugby guy at one of the early Olympics, Commonwealth Games in KL, John Olomu, who was there. He was just a phenomenon at that time. He was just there. So, one thing that they worked really hard on with the New Zealand team, I'm sure they do it with the Australian team, is create this, this one team. How do you create all these different codes and people coming in and being one? So they worked really hard on that. So it meant that you could come in and you could sit down next to these guys or have a chat with these guys, which was kind of surreal. And the basketballer guys, they were always kind of staying out, but they always the messages we got was they actually really, really missed the village and the whole thing about being part of the event, because it's not just about the event, it's about all this other stuff which goes on too.
It's interesting when it's funny when you see somebody on television and then you actually meet them. You're a character.
Jonah, he's big.
Well, you're a real person.
Boy, yeah, definitely.
Well, just on that, I want to come back to Dion about coming to Australia, but Tiff, you actually had a stint in America, if I remember, working there, didn't you? Yeah. A few, but you didn't you have one extended stint? I mean, you've been on. Didn't you have an extended stint there?
Yeah, so the first one was with CNN, and I had a scholarship, so I went over, and then I got a real taste. And for me, CNN, which was sort of back in the early days, it was the first 24-hour network. I had then, years later, not long later, but I then started off obviously at Fox Footy, which became only the third 24-hour network, only months behind the NFL network, which was behind the CNN. So when I was asked to join Fox Footy, I had obviously an understanding of what that 24-hour network meant. And to me, I was like a kid in a candy store. And I say candy, I was in America, you know, but it was like I could work 24 hours if I wanted to. Not that I did, but like, you know, and I just loved the media. I loved storytelling. I loved understanding how stories came to life. And there was this, you know, massive building, the Turner building. It's about whatever it is, 10 stories high. And, you know, at the very top was Ted and his wife at the time, what's her name? Jane Fonda, who I actually was in the lift with, just her and I one day, and didn't say hello.
You should have.
She looked me up and down and then she turned away. But anyway, so it was just an amazing experience. And then I came back and then I worked for Fox Footy. I worked for Channel 7, then for Fox Footy. And then I got this phone call one day from the guy that was setting up Fox Footy. And I was working at Channel 7 at the time, and I took it and I thought he was wanting me to send them a tape of this, you know, the football story I'd done that day. And he said he was from Foxtel. And I was like, oh yeah, how can I help you? And he said, oh, I want to know what you're doing next year. And I was like, what? Anyway, so I ended up doing that. And then when Fox Footy, most people forget, but Fox Footy wasn't around for 5 years. Yeah. So we had the first incarnation of 2001 to the end of 05, 06. And then I got a job with ESPN. And prior to that, I'd been to America and traveled around the world on my own when I was 25, and I just loved New York. And I always wanted, and I made a pact with myself that I would one day live in New York. So this was sort of my opportunity. And I went over, first of all, I set up the bureau in Australia, in Melbourne, and I worked with them for a year here. And then they invited me over to the ESPY Awards, which is the Academy Awards of Sport.
Yeah.
So there I am interviewing, you name it, like interviewing just this cavalcade of stars, of the biggest names in world sport. Mike Tyson, you know, walking past me, you know, like The Rock, you know, that just David Beckham, they just kept coming.
Yeah.
It was, you know, Ronaldo, blah, blah, blah. Shaquille O'Neal. It was just incredible. And then some of them I had no idea who they were. And then people would be like, this is such and such, and I'd quickly do a quick Google search. But that was just incredible. And as you say, Dion, you know, and Simon, these people just, you know, once you meet them, like, for example, David Beckham is pretty much one of the biggest world stars ever.
Yes.
And he was just like your average. He would be here right now. He was a ripper. He was just so down to earth. He was so interested in what I had to say. We had this great conversation. He gave me a worldwide exclusive that he was coming to Australia. And he just sort of whispered that at the end. He said, I've got something for you, and, you know, off you go. You can do what you want with it. And it was just, and that actually really put sport in perspective for me, because, you know, being a journalist in the football fishbowl, Simon, you know, like, you sort of grow up and you look and you followed football, and then, you know, so you start reporting on these stories, and the football people, the players and people in the industry, you know, they're sort of high, they're up on a bit of a pedestal. Yes. And some of the behaviour of some, you know, sports people can be way and above beyond, you know, what really behaviour should be.
Yes.
And you know, there'd always sort of be this disparity of where you stand. And
yes, this status thing, yeah.
And that one interview changed my entire perspective, my entire outlook. And I came home and I was like, I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't mean that in an arrogant way. I was just like, if David Beckham can behave like that, then you know what, your behaviour, and if you're going to behave like that, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And it really changed my whole outlook, and even, I suppose, the course of my, you know, my career and my life, and where I headed, because I just sort of put that, putting up with that, I put it behind me. And
that's great. No, that's really good. Someone said to me, you know, be kind to the people on the way up, because you'll meet them on the way down. And I think,
absolutely,
you know, that concept of treating people as people and the way they want to be treated is really important. And I think, you know, in the world of sport, the really top ones seem to have that already. They don't need to get that. So that's great. And now, that's a great experience. And Dion, I think Dion's just jumped up.
That's a great photo of you, Dion.
You might have accidentally dropped out there. No, he's back.
I dropped out.
No, that's
I'm
right,
going for a walk.
I like the photo, though. Photo.
There you go. You're getting a better connection, mate.
I'm going to come back into the.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to. That's all those things. We we have fibre to the curb here in my place, but you're still on copper in between. So you're not sure if it's going to work or not. You know, I'm hoping we get. They're talking about. They're talking about bringing copper into the node. I think that's a fancy term, or whatever. I can't remember. But it'd be good if they did that. If they could fibre here, then you could be all dancing, all singing on the screen. Now, just on the coming to Australia. So how's that? You might have frozen a little bit too.
Yeah. No, I think I should be back now. I'm back.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Well,
that's right. That's just your screenshot. That's fine.
That's all right.
It's not too bad.
Your screenshot's all right. So there you go. It's like you're coming to Australia.
You've seen the light.
Coming to Australia. Yeah, I know. Oh,
do you come for work? Do you come for holiday? Do you come for a person? And do you stay?
Well, I think I've always really loved Melbourne. It's been one of those places. I came here in 1992 for when I was in the under-21 side, the junior Black Six, and we came here and we had a series against Italy. And from that point on, I just thought this was such a vibrant, really super interesting city around. The best way to combine sport with the arts was my impression about how Melbourne's, it's got its act together. So I've always had a bit of an affinity here, and I guess through getting into the architecture and the sports world, if you love sports and you love the arts, then Melbourne's the place to come. So I've always, in developing a business in New Zealand, I always had an idea, strategically anyway, that I wanted to be able to come to Melbourne. So I've been coming backwards and forwards here for quite some time. And then I ended up on Tinder, and I signed myself up, and I had myself with Auckland, and I wouldn't say working through the candidates, but I because I was traveling here quite a bit, I thought, right, well, I'm going to, let's just see what happens if I just extend my radius 2,600 kilometres and see what I can get and base myself in Melbourne. So anyway, I ended up landing and meeting my current partner Annie here, and so it's just kind of developed. So it all kind of ended up falling into place, expanding the business into here, coming here for something personal, but also kind of ticking the box to come to a city that I've always really, really wanted the Melbourne experience for. So I'm living the dream now, Simon.
That's great. That's good to hear, because
awesome.
It's good to hear, because we keep, you see all the surveys, and Melbourne's supposed to be one of the most livable cities, so we pop ourselves up something shocking. So it's good to hear somebody from another country say, no, we agree with that. That's really good.
And at the moment, no one's saying that.
No, not at the moment. It's the most.
Well, you call back to New Zealand, the COVID what?
Yeah,
lockdown
what? Yeah. We've got our daughter and her husband and our first grandchild in Auckland at the moment. So we're doing a lot of waving. I think young Edward John will think that his grandmother and grandfather are two cartoon characters on the computer. I think that's what's going to do.
I think that I wouldn't say there's so many Kiwis here. Like I went to the Boxing Day test, of course, just gone, and honestly, Annie came with me, and she was going, I haven't met anyone that I know here, and you've just met like 2,000 people.
I had my next door neighbours were Kiwis, and I got them tickets to come as well, and they said the same thing. They were like, "There's so many Kiwis here. This is awesome."
Well, it's interesting because in all of this, I found out in all this that one of our biggest tourist centres coming here is New Zealand. There's a lot of people come along, and that's great. It's good to have them here. And now I just want to talk about, because I want to talk about your business in a little bit. Because anybody comes on here's got a chance to promote anything you like, so don't forget that, Tiff. Right? So, just on that, Tiffany, like you're not just a journalist, because you actually, you've got a Bachelor of Applied Science of Physiotherapy. Is that right?
Yeah, I started out as a physio, and in fact, in my football career, I was Richmond's physio. They had sort of the senior and the junior physio, and I was the first, female ever officially allowed into the Richmond room. So I was told, way back in 1995.
Fantastic.
So, I finished my degree in '94, and I started, and got a job, got a scholarship at Olympic Park Sports Medicine Centre, and
big centre. They're very big centre.
And then through the doctor and the physio that were there, they were working at Richmond, and the job was going, and they pulled me in. And a guy who became quite notorious, you might remember him, Simon, by the name of Brian Waldron.
Yes.
Who ended up being notorious with our Melbourne Storm Dion team, which is part of the NRL, and for salary cap rorting. But anyway, so Wally was the football manager at the time of Richmond, and the doctor and the physio took me down, and I was sort of like, whatever, again, I grew up with an older brother, and, being a female and I went to a co-ed school, so it was nothing for me. And they were like, oh, we want to, Tiff's right for the job. And they started talking about me. And I remember just standing in the room, kind of just listening. And they're like, hang on, she can't, she can't say, how's this going to work? They're going to be naked. And I remember saying, do you remember the old Tucker Bad act with the paper bag on your head?
Yeah,
I remember putting my hand up and going, I can work with a paper bag on my head. And then they looked at me, the three of them looked at me. They forgot that I was in the room.
Exactly right, yeah.
And then Wally said, can you go and stand outside? So I had to stand outside and wait. And then they came back out, and the doctor and the physio were jumping up and down. Like, I got along really well with them. And the doctor was actually my former doctor. Anyway, and so they were like, you got the job, but on one condition. And I said, oh, okay, well, whatever. What is that? And they said, you have to give Swooper. And I'm like, who's Swooper? They go, you have to give John Northey, who was the coach of the time, a massage to prove you're strong enough. And I was like, what? And they said, yep, you got to. So we're going to set up this massage. So there I was, days later, giving Swooper a massage, just him and I in the rooms. And they said to me, we know that you can massage, so just go for it. Go as hard as you want. So I absolutely annihilated him.
Did you put the elbows in?
I did everything. I was like, I want to show you. Want me to show you? So, and to his credit, he didn't make a sound. He was writhing around a little.
Doing the
he was moving in pain. And then I remember he got up and he nodded. And then I went back across the road to Olympic Park, and they came jumping in, going, "You got the job. You got the job." So that was sort of my foray into. I don't even know what the original question was, but
no, but that's good because that just sort of leads a little bit into. I think because I'm very big, I like to just touch on, because people come from different backgrounds, a little bit on overcoming adversity. So I suppose, Tiff, for you, just being the female, like now it's a given, because we've got female football teams, lots of females in sport, but that first point of overcoming the fact that you're a female and you want to get into sport, especially football, that would have been a big obstacle to overcome.
Well, it was an obstacle more in other people's heads.
Yeah.
I grew up, again, remembering I grew up in that single household with my mum, who told me that I could do anything. Yeah. So I believed. And because I had an older brother who was athletically gifted, and the only way I could, not be on my own was to try and keep up with him. So I was always, and I wasn't anywhere near as good at sport as he is. And I just, so I was just always trying to be better. To keep up.
Yeah,
so then when the opportunity came to be the first female boundary rider, for me, I was like, I couldn't, whatever. And then and then people wanted to do interviews, and I remember being asked, it would be by the current sort of cohort of journos who have sort of all gone through the same time. I remember a few of them saying, what's it like to be a female in the male changing rooms? And I remember saying, I don't know what it's like to be a male in the male changing rooms. I'm just in the changing rooms.
That's right, yeah.
And then I remember them going, oh, but, you see naked people. I'm like, yeah, but so does a gynecologist.
Yes, exactly.
He's a naked woman. You don't ask him what it, like, and then they're like, can you see things? And I'm like, sure, I can see things, but I don't look. And for me, it's like driving up the Hume Highway. I know almost every tree along that Hume Highway. There's trunks, there's twigs, there's branches, So there's all different things. Yeah. And I know that they're all there. I just am not looking at the size of it.
Yeah, that's very good.
I'm a trunk. I'm not a twig. And I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, good. Good. Well, Dion, about you overcoming obstacles. So, as a sports person or in business, because you're running your own business now, 106 Architects, there's a plug for it, and you're specialising in, as well as residential and commercial, a lot of sporting stuff. But for you, overcoming obstacles, and moving into like a business and coming across to Tasman? Any obstacles you've had to face at any stage?
Oh, nothing at all. It was easy coming across here. Oh, I think it goes back. So I went through my architecture degree, and as soon as I finished, which was around about 94, I just decided to work for myself anyway. So a lot of that was just contract drawing, and I do friends' houses. But ultimately, what it gave me was the ability to have flexibility and take charge of my own time. So I could do a bit of work in the morning, I could go off, do a training session, come back, and I didn't feel bound to anyone, or I didn't feel as though I had to go and ask an employer for some time off, or it was all, I was able to manage it. A lot of the guys that I went through with would end up just feeling uncomfortable about asking for 6 weeks off to go do a tournament or have some training. So I think that kind of in this idea of grabbing a hold, or having a plan, but also having your own destiny in your own hands. And I think if we talk about adversity or how that kind of looks for us, I guess the biggest disappointment was not qualifying for Sydney 2000. So we were I'd been in the team probably for 6 or 7 years at that stage, and we had quite a core group of us had come through. We failed at a qualifying tournament in Osaka, which I got dropped for. And that would just kind of put us right down the bottom of the order. So a lot of us in that core group, and as in teams, you can get a really good core group that kind of can focus on all of their roles and going forward. Then how does that look and how does that play out? So I think we all kind of got together at the end of that 2000 campaign and kind of went, look, let's keep going. The Commonwealth Games are coming up soon. Let's stick it out. So we kind of formed a plan and actually just got in. So rather than just being, this idea of, head felt set of goals that you get through, it just became a bit more, we owned it in our hearts. And I think that helped us go through. So those two things around having a plan and then having it as a bit of emotional attachment and a bit of a story to how you might overcome some challenges has certainly kind of carried forward. And it meant then that, so then when we went to the 2002 Commonwealth Games and we got into the final, the game for us was actually the semi-final where we beat Pakistan. We'd never ever beaten them. We beat them 6-1 in the semi-final. So, we just played. It was just one of those games, we heard of these stories. Oh, everyone's on the same page and doing all this. The team briefing was, I used to think that was a load of crap actually, until we had this game, and everything was just so easy and it fell into place. And we were actually emotionally spent going into that final anyway, because that game just totally nailed us. But what that meant is then we said, right, from there, let's springboard through to Athens. And we're all still really just working through our own work to try and get time off. And we all just decided for that campaign to Athens, we're just going to just focus on that. So that flexibility in my own time and setting up my own business, I think if I was working 2 or 3 hours a day, for those from January through to July, it would have been pretty lucky. But everyone was doing the same thing. We were all just going. So that created, an environment where you can kind of bring people through. And I think now you look at this COVID thing, and there's definitely been challenges for all businesses and everybody, but you kind of fall back and you go, okay, let's put a plan into place for ourselves, and let's just kind of keep chipping away and have some confidence in what we're doing and our original direction, and strategically thinking about, this is what I think, this is why I set myself up, and you just step through some of that. So you have good days and you have bad days, but I think you've got that little, the intent is clear, and I've been able to combine, like you have, Tiff, you kind of got your sport and your journalism or your TV. If you can kind of find that, if you can find that sweet spot where you've something you're really, really passionate about, and you can combine that with work or career, it's not really work. I used to hear that a lot as well. I thought that was a load of rubbish until we sort of found that. But it's kind of true. So now, the kids come out and they see me working at, 8 o'clock at night, or, and they say, working on the weekend, they go, oh, what a sucker, you're doing work. You go, well, mate, this is not work for me. I'm just doing it. Here, I'll show you what we're doing. I get to draw pretty pictures all day. So I think having that plan and just having, there's the goal and there's the site, and we're working towards it together, and having that emotional connection to your passion kind of helps you get over a whole lot of dirty stuff, I reckon.
That's good. It's good. Now, so, Tiffany, what's the future hold?
It's a good question. So
yeah, it is a good question, and this time it's a very good question for everybody.
So similar to Dion, I've obviously I had my physio career and then the journalism, and after the London Olympics, I was really and so I achieved that dream of hosting. And
yeah.
Look, actually, the journey getting there was far better than the actual experience. Even though the Olympics is amazing, just working, I had shifts that I was working from 11 o'clock till 6 in the morning. It just, it wasn't anywhere near what you had in your head, but the journey was incredible. And so I pivoted and actually just quit. Was exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally, in every way. And I could feel myself getting sick. So I also wanted to have a family, and, there was all that sort of going by. And when you commit yourself to your sport or your career, that's so single-minded, there's not much room for anything else, as you both would know. So, so I just basically stopped everything and then was lost for a while and didn't, I loved the media. I loved storytelling, and I realized then that I was a storyteller, and it's taken me quite a while to sort of find out really what it is that I wanted to do. But exactly like Dion said, I sort of went through a bit of a journey. I did, I thought, do I want to be a sports manager? So I went and did that course, and then I was like, no, I don't really like wiping people's butts. Again, that sort of, that disparity in the, you're better. That I just didn't. I loved equality, and I did an MBA, and I studied leadership and innovation, and I started loving that. And then I just finish 3 years at Richmond. I went back there as a multimedia executive, and then someone said to me one day, I've got an idea for you. And he said this idea. I'm not going to share the idea because I'm still working on it.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But it comprises my 3 loves. So I started also developing a real love for our environment. I sat on my first board, and it's called SEA. The acronym is Sports Environment Alliance. So bringing sport and our environment together, so to protect our places of play so that we can play. And that's been phenomenal. And I've just developed it, and then I ended up doing Al Gore's training as an environmental steward, and now I'm working in an environmental arena, which is becoming a big component of society. And so I've sort of grown with that. But so on the side, I'm building up my own business, which combines my love of sport, my love for equality, and for environment. So it's an environmentally friendly business. But I'm currently working with a business called Ag Bioen, which is pretty amazing. They turn agricultural waste. So if you think you plant a crop of corn, you pick your corn, and the rest of the crop goes in the back paddock, and it just rots, and the methane's released, and that contributes to obviously to global warming. And the terrible cycle. But they turn this through a whole sort of electrolysis and engineering stuff that's way above my mental capacity. But they put in a machine, and most of it, 90% of it, just about is recycled into high grade jet fuel, diesel fuel, pure water, electricity, fertilizer. It's just incredible. And then there's a whole gamut of just other stuff I'm working on. Like a disinfectant that potentially will change the world and allow us to go back into sporting events. But just not only that, it can be applied in, airports, transport, public places, shopping centres, blah, blah, blah. So there's just a variety of things that I'm learning. So you're
not very busy by the sound of it.
No, but I'm loving it. And I wanted to bring up something too. I'm an ambassador for the Royal Flying Doctors, and there's a little campaign that we've got going on, but it connects to Essendon because the Royal Flying Doctors hangar is in Essendon. Yes. And so there's a virtual event that you can do. So just if anyone's interested, and so it's raising money for the mental health facilities that the Royal Flying Doctors have in certain parts of Victoria. Obviously during these times, mental health is just paramount. Not only for those who are more susceptible, but for all of us. And, that isolation can be... Yes. Can really magnify, issues or create them. So if you type in base to bush, so it's the Essendon base to bush, there's three different distances, and it's a 6 week. You can do it over 6 weeks. So rather than doing a big fun run or a big bike ride or whatever, and you've got to do it on that day, you can log in every day. You can do your 5Ks or your 7.5Ks or your 10Ks. You can do it as an individual or as a team. You just get someone to sponsor you, and it just gives you, a goal every day to aspire to. But eventually, so there's one in Horsham, which is the 5K one. So after 6 weeks, if you do an average of 5Ks, you will have run, if you run 5Ks a day, you would have run from Essendon to the Horsham base.
Ah, right. Yes, good.
Yeah, so that's awesome. And then I do stuff with Our Watch, which is protecting women and children against violence. So again, there's a big campaign they're doing with Mimco, and you can get your Mimco face mask, and 100% of the profits go towards Our Watch and programs. And you would have seen the commercials on television. It's not okay. Like, any excuse is not okay for violence against anyone, but certainly women and children in these times.
Fantastic. Tiffany, well, I was going to say, you are not very busy at all. That's fantastic. It's great. Dion, the future for you? I think we've got time for one more.
Yeah, look, I think set up here is something I really want to concentrate on. So we're working at the moment on this idea of third place, and I know I've spoken to you about it. It's not my concept, but it's something which we're now taking through into our sports facility. So the idea of, between home and work are the two places we hang out in a lot. What is that third place, that central social space? And so we're just exploring the idea or the theme that can our sports facilities be our new third place, and what can that look like? Like, it's not a mid-century thing anymore. What does that mean today in terms of cultural overlay and our own local identity, pulling in the climate aspects? It's not just having a beer in the pub kind of thing. Yeah. So continuing on those thoughts around that. So that gets manifest through master plan work that we're doing now about bringing in multiple sports on sites in together to try and create some harmony, but also some synergies and potential collaborations across how sports groups might work. A lot of sports groups have got rundown buildings on parks, and they can't maintain them. So, some of the thinking is, can we use some efficiencies there in our development to bring these groups together and just realise a new third place effectively. So, one of the really awesome things that we've had insight into is all the different cultures and subtleties across all the different sports, and what that means when they intersect together. It's massively interesting, because each sport, when you're embedded in it, you know the culture really well, and the idiosyncrasy. So when you bring all them together, what happens within that dynamic has been really interesting. So we'll just continue building up the master planning and those ideas around different sites. Of course, we'll work on some projects continuing into New Zealand and develop through the Eastern Seaboard. Obviously, with the fire, the bushfire season that we have, that idea of community has been fractured a little bit. So what happens with the rebuild within those communities, and what does that look like, and what role can sport and community have in the rebuild process? Some really interesting outcomes, I think, coming through here with councils and the state have some money. What do they do with it? How do they get biggest bang for the buck, and how do they bring people together ultimately? Because we were involved in some Christchurch earthquake work in New Zealand, and what we found is once the roofs were put back on and people had running water, then it was searching around, well, what else binds us together in the community? So that's kind of allowed us to think, well, can our sports facilities offer something here, and is that something different? So really exciting thinking and investment. Where does that money go into to give the biggest bang for buck for people and for state and council? So really looking forward to the next couple of years to see how that progresses, and enjoy Melbourne. It's an awesome, great.
Well, let's jump in, Simon. I just want to ask Dion, is there an environmental skew? And if there's not, that's no problem. Not putting it, but with regards to taking it to the next level. So in terms of how you capture water and creating cool spaces and, electricity and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I found that compared to New Zealand, I think here in Australia, the councils are much further advanced around the ESD, the environmentally sustainable design policies and practice documents that they have in place. So a lot of the work that we get involved with is already an overlay, or at least an intent of some of the standards that they want to achieve. So the challenge then is to work at that early concept stage to understand what those line items might be, and ultimately they have a cost value to them. So at the moment, I'd have to say that a lot of those ESD initiatives kind of get put below the line, but where we can show that it impacts or provides savings from a long-term operational point of view, like rainwater harvesting or solar panels to allow some of the capture with energy, then I think we're starting to get a bit more traction. It's starting to be heard. Things like in hockey, with the water that gets irrigated across turfs, we're now starting to see systems that do capture that much more efficiently, and then recycle that and put that back onto the turf. And FIH have started a program where they want to slowly pull out the water and irrigation on their surfaces. So I think we're starting to see much more at a policy level that put in. I think where we need to see it is on the ground. And so from a monetary point of view, what's the value in this and what's the long-term life cycle costing of that, where this will help?
Just just very quickly, and I know you're wrapping up, Simon, but I set up Richmond's Environmental Action Committee and signed them up to the United Nations, the UNFCCC, and Richmond became the first AFL club to undergo a full environmental audit. We hadn't finished it by the time my contract came to an end, because COVID had hit, but we had saved over a 6-month period $200,000 just through a number of initiatives that, like, I just went down and said, look, what's the low-hanging fruit? And admittedly, half of that saving came from actually switching energy providers to an environmentally friendly, and just by switching and getting different costings, we saved $100,000 with the gas and electricity. But another $100,000 simply by even auditing the number of uniforms, and why do we need new uniforms every year? Like, who actually needs one? And changing the water bottles. When you go into a sports club and instead of having water from a plastic water bottle, and think about all the energy that's gone to collecting that, bringing it, all that kind of stuff. Just going to a tap and using filtered water. Just the savings were pretty amazing. So it can actually save a lot of money. But anyway, I was going to say I could go that a bit further about. I'm just you two are changing the world, and I'm just running. Facilitating it.
Just facilitating it. Yeah. So look, fantastic. That was a great conversation at the end, and maybe we might be able to get you back to study that a bit further. But Dion Gosling, good luck with 106 Architects, and not sure if you'll be coaching any hockey in the future, but good luck with that. And Tiffany Cherry, love you dearly, that, and you're love you being an Essendon supporter too. Keep the faith. I keep saying.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah, we've had a hard year, but we'll keep the faith. But that's fantastic. Good luck with that too, and thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed it. Good luck for the future, and we'll see that we'll get through it. We know. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Simon. Nice to see you. Yeah, good to